know, when I tell people I cosplay, often they're like, oh, what characters do you usually do? And I'm like, how do I even begin to explain the time that I built a refrigerator-sized contraption to cosplay the concept of a D&D session? I don't know, but we're sure gonna try. Hey, I'm Lizard Leigh, and the last big cosplay I made before the Fire Nation attacked, essentially, was in February 2020 for my 10th KATSUCON. Today I'm here to dive into why I made this, how I made this, and also dive into the cosplay itself. Like, I am going to put it on, which is a process. Stick around to find out how much I actually remember how to do that. Like I said, this cosplay is an original design based on Dungeons & Dragons, which is something I big love. It's for sure one of my favorite things I've ever made. Honestly, I did accidentally invent a new school of magic making this, and it's the School of Hampermancy. I'm pumped as hell to get back into it, so thank you for joining me here in my baby brand new channel. We're gonna make it a powerful baby, I can tell. Let's start unpacking all of this. Literally. First off, this is the kind of thing I've done many times where instead of cosplaying something like normal and comprehensible, my brain goes, but what if I did this? Like, for better or worse, I have these wacky cosplay ideas, and I also have the ambition and stubbornness to actually bring them to the prime material plane. And I do have a secret Krabby Patty formula for how I keep concept cosplays on track in development, which I am sharing now. To keep these builds from being too general or unfocused, I always make sure that I have two anchor points. The specific thing that I love the most from that universe, and the style, aesthetic, visual language. My Animal Crossing cosplay is a great example, because when I was making this, I wasn't thinking about a general Animal Crossing cosplay. The specific concept was my inventory in Animal Crossing as like a Disney princess. As a completionist, my inventory is the #1 most important thing to me in Animal Crossing, and I love the soft femme drag of a princess costume. This way I didn't get lost in the weeds trying to fit in NPCs and villagers, and I knew what kind of silhouette and patterns I was aiming for. Every concept cosplay I do, figuring out the this but make it that, is completely mandatory to keeping me on the rails. So when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, I asked myself, what is the specific thing I love most about D&D? At first, I was heading in a very dice-oriented direction, but then I realized the obvious answer is a D&D session itself. Like, that's where the love react is. That's where the big dokies are. It's when you're actually sitting down with your party members to play. Hand in hand with that, I realized that I have always been very drawn to the aesthetic of like an overloaded fantasy merchant. Your Beatles, your Happy Mask salesmans. I love the maximalism. I love the vibes. I love the backpack lesbian jokes. So many completely disparate things go into a TTRPG session that I honestly think choosing the chaos of a traveling salesman is the only way I could have made it all work visually. I will also say I knew I already had some base supplies to make this work, which I will get to later. And also, honestly, I just wanted to make something ridiculously large for KATSUCON. So mission statement worked out, D&D session as a fantasy merchant, time to actually figure out how to design that. I started this project the old-fashioned way, by making a story post on Instagram and asking my friends and followers what physical items they associate with playing D&D. Obviously, I'd already started my own list of what I think of, but the kind of great thing about tabletop role-playing games is that there's just so many different ways to play them, and every group of humans is going to have their own session necessities and their own pre-game rituals, and it helped this design a lot to get ideas from so many different parties. I culled these ideas into a list because my brain just can't resist the allure of taxonomy, I guess. I divided these items into 4 categories: dice, notes, maps, and ambiance. So dice also included things like trays and towers, notes included things like character sheets and pencils, and also game books. Maps was about the grid and also miniatures and tokens, and ambiance was, you know, snacks, beverages, a nice smelling candle, your playlists. Besides this like chart of things that go into a session, I also made a really quick list of techniques I wanted to use in this build. It's one of my favorite things about doing original designs, that I don't have to wait around for things that excite me as a craftsperson and the things that excite me in a character or story to providentially align. I can just decide what I think would be fun and cool and figure out a way to make that work. My initial sketch was in pencil because I was really just aiming for the silhouette and shape of the guy. Also, I knew I wanted most of the base garment to be stash busted using fabric I already have, so I didn't want to commit too hard on colors. In retrospect, I would not have done this. I'm gonna try and keep the self-criticism to a post-mortem future look later in this video, but just know I have plans to upgrade some stuff I think I could have done a better job on. With that said, I love the silhouette on this. I knew I wanted to bring in shapes and fit that I find flattering and that hit me in the correct gender spots. I also just love a poof short with a thigh high, so it's my design and I can do what I want. I feel like vests always read very merchant-y, and the little overskirt drape kind of kept it from being too formal. Also, who doesn't want a belt-mounted player's handbook? The backpack itself I designed very loosely and more in sections than anything else. Like, I liked the idea of having a side for maps and papers, and then a side for snacks and nourishment, and then the back was, you know, we'll figure it out kind of vibes. Also, let's be clear, at this point, looking at the timestamps on my phone, it is January 22nd, and KATSUCON is what, like February 13th, 14th? So choices were being made, and it was past time to start making. Chronologically, my first step was actually making this custom D20 fabric that I had printed. I designed this in Photoshop and tried to make it interesting enough that it didn't read like a flat yellow. Like most things in my life, I Googled how to make a tiling repeatable design and like figured it out. If you didn't see the first video on this channel, I have a lot to say about the importance of just Googling it. I did that and I ended up with great fabric. These shorts came together really fast. I love a poof short. They're really simple to make and they allow me to make a lot of, I like shorts. They're comfy and easy to wear jokes. The way I make puff shorts is I grab a pair of shorts that I like, I trace the crotch, and then I just double or triple the width of the short. Make sure you leave room for the waistband to dip down just like an inch or so in the center, and you've got a pair of shorts. Also, honestly, I love hand gathering fabric. To me, it's like Animal Crossing levels of zen. The overskirt, I kinda just freehand draped using some muslin. It was really just trial and error to get it looking how I liked. Also, I will say that with this skirt, I did something that is one of my worst skipped steps in construction. I let the fabric pieces hang out for a day before I put them in the waistband. If you ever have a lined skirt that ends up getting that kind of bubbly, bunchy bit at the hemline, letting the pieces hang out can let that sort of natural shifting of the fibers happen before you put it in the final waistband. Also, look at these little D20s from a Cricut. I would give this little waist cincher the dubious honor of caused me the most headaches for not nearly enough payoff. Like, the look has a belt, so this cincher was totally aesthetic and did not at all need to be functional, but I somehow still ended up spending a ton of time finessing the fit. Also, I was reusing velvet from my Not the Festive cape, and velvet is such a headache. Just a disproportionate amount of effort for something that ended up being like just barely visible, you know? I am still in love with this vest. I made this using one of my favorite vintage patterns. Look at these babes. Are you kidding me? This is a tag yourself. The copyright here is from 1989 and like, yeah, correct. I knew I was going to have a lot of iridescence in the design, so I went with a kind of iridescent reading fabric from my stash. These little detail bits on the trim were sewn on with 1-inch spacing as a kind of nod to the inch grid map in D&D. I'm not sure how well that intention reads in the final design, but you know, you live and you learn about making design choices. Also, she's got little hexagonal buttons for the way like a D20 looks. This shirt is full of crimes. That's why the sleeves are so big. I can't lie to y'all, I actually made this thing in a night due to some shenanigans with the fabric delivery. So like, it's literally just rectangles. I mean, the bottom isn't even finished. Most of these hems are just straight up like heat and bonded on. We made it work, it's functional, and that is what matters. Now to our belt-mounted props. This player's handbook is literally an Amazon box and foam and cardboard. The details are vinyl and some fabric and also some scrapbooking paper. For small props where you want an interesting pattern or texture and it doesn't need to be like rugged, scrapbooking paper is one of my favorite ways to pump up a prop. This dice tray is mostly scrapbooking paper too, and honestly, this little guy was one of the first things I made for this project. It really helped me get a feel for combining like metallics and open weave fabrics and trying to make it all feel cohesive. This 3D printed dice jail is from Giant Turtle Creations on Etsy, and it's maybe my favorite detail to see people notice just because it's so little and everything else is so large. As a note, especially as we approach the glorious refrigerator, sometimes there's like a light disappointment when people learn that something on this build is non-functional, like the PHB or the spigot on the side. I think that's my top unwanted advice I get on this build, is how I could make parts of it actually work. And I want to be clear, I will never, ever do this. My first wear of this cosplay, I got into it at 12:45 in the afternoon, and I did not change out of it until 9:15 at night. I wore this cosplay for 8.5 hours, with like 2 little sit-down breaks. Because of the way I built it, this is one of my comfiest cosplays. So let's talk about how I built it. So a few years back, I had dreams of cosplaying Upsy from the Adventure Zone, who is a sentient elevator, and I bought a pop-up play tent. Didn't end up making the cosplay, had a weird yellow school bus in the back of my closet for a while there. I also had on hand a vintage children's hiking backpack frame. I had bought this off of eBay the year before when I was making my Charlotte cosplay from Madoka Magica, because I had initially wanted to make a really giant puppet monster, and due to crunch, it ended up being more like a handheld prop. The initial thought was, I will combine these two. I know that oversized parade puppets use a lot of PVC pipe, so I figured I could rig something on the backpack to hold the play tent onto the frame. However, even without doing any tests, I knew the play tent didn't have the structural integrity to support all of the hot nonsense I was going to be attaching to it. It was too big with too little internal support, so I started trying to think of how I could reinforce it while also knowing that anything I made was going to have to break down and fit in a suitcase. Somehow it hit me like a beautiful lightning bolt out of the sky that instead of trying to reinforce one big thing, I should try to build out of many smaller things. This is how we got to hampers. I bought 3 cheap hampers off Amazon that I knew would fit in my suitcase and give me dimensions I wanted. A lot of this build came from Amazon, which is something I have really consciously tried to stop doing with my builds and in my personal life the last 1.5 years or so, because f you, Jeff. I zip tied them together and did a proof of concept. This was a wildly thrilling moment for me, like 10 days before the con, realizing that my scheme was going to work. Like, this is just then zip tied to the frame. I built up a beefier mount for them using the PVC pipe. Honestly, y'all, I don't really own power tools. Like, I live in an apartment, so I straight up just ferociously duct taped the bottom pipe to the frame instead of attaching it with screws. Totally worked out fine. The beauty of this rig is that the whole thing is mostly hollow. I knew there would be some weird lumps if I didn't find a way to soften the frame edges, so I ended up taking some 1/2-inch upholstery foam, cutting that to size, slapping it on with Velcro. This did a great job smoothing out the wire of the hampers and also made it literally look like a refrigerator. To make the cover, I stitched together just a huge length of fabric. I cut slits for the arm straps and sewed on the biggest zipper I could find. Interfaced a giant flap for the top, and we had our comically oversized knapsack. I'm gonna go deeper into how everything assembles in the next section, but to just briefly celebrate the wonderful Dungeons & Dragons accoutrement we have. I was truly honored that Devin Rue, who is like the TTRPG cartographer, saw my thread about this on Twitter and offered to send me some maps to incorporate. I will forever be grateful for this generosity. It's astonishing to me that these maps are involved in this build. I also included a character sheet that Well, not gonna lie to y'all, this weathering that you see, I did that in the Gaylord Hotel coffee maker the night before I wore it. You deserve the truth about my crunch habits. So if this was our notes section of the backpack, the other side was our ambiance section, aka snacks. So, the baguette. People love the baguette. People fear the baguette. People have so many questions about the baguette. Why the baguette? Because snacks are an extremely important part of a D&D session, and I wanted to find the snacks that didn't feel incongruous with the fantasy traveler vibe. Also, I think the little foam baked goods are cute as hell, and I wanted one. You've got a spigot for your beverage of choice. Yes, that is a real spigot that I just mounted on foam and paper. We've got some labels that say sweet and salty, and real talk, I've got a lot to say about this in the future upgrades category. The back was pretty speedy. We've got a little folding DM screen and a little dice tower hanging off like a keychain. Also, I made a descriptive patch for the bottom in Photoshop that I cut on my Cricut. Ultimately, I didn't want the back to feel empty, but I know people will always be more interested in the front. So let's discuss these freaking dice. We were in the absolute vice grip that KDA had on con culture at this moment in time. Stella Chu had put out a really thorough tutorial on making her Ari tails that I knew a lot of KDA cosplayers were using. I watched this video and was like, great, done. That's literally it, and I don't need to spend any brain cells on it. The short version of this technique is that I used lightweight acrylic sheets cut to size. I used my Cricut, you don't have to use a Cricut, spray adhesive, and regular old cellophane to get the really cool iridescent effect. And the faces come together with packing tape. The main cost of this method is that since the shapes are put together in flat lays for travel, it does take some time the night before in the hotel room to get your tails or dice or whatever you make into its final 3D form. But I'm that person that really doesn't mind saying, I can't, I have cos crunch the Thursday night of a con. For me, that trade-off to have dice that weighed nothing and also traveled totally flat and looked amazing was completely worth a few hours of hotel time. So speaking of Thursday night at a con, these were my suitcases for the whole weekend. This included this cosplay, my Her Universe transformation garment, a Steven Universe cosplay, and all my normal clothes and toiletries. That is it. So let's not think too hard about the implications of time traveling to February of 2020, and let's see if I can remember how to put this all together. Oh my gosh, this is the moment of truth, y'all. Great, fantastic. We're just gonna film as we go. Time for the magic. Got it. Okay, all right. Very glad about the Velcro I have here to hold it in place on the PVC pipe. I totally forgot. I'm having a moment. I just realized I just remembered something I forgot at my storage unit. Oh my god. Just classic. Oh, yep, there she is. Well, we made it back. Here they are. Here are the beautiful refrigerator pieces. So this kind of front fabric bit here, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, it was a total panic move because I just needed something to cover the ugly zipper. Okay, let me try and remember how we do this. Actually, I know this is not fantastic video right now, but it really is just a lot of kind of manhandling it and shoving the foam around and kind of attempting to keep it, moderately centered. Yeah, joke's on me. Turns out I did forget a lot of things. This flat piece of cardboard I popped in the very top of the hamper, and that helped keep the mesh up here from doing what it's doing right now, which is getting kind of loosey-goosey. Gonna correct that real quick. Okay, so putting our straps back on. Fantastic. If memory serves, up top, I think it's mostly just safety pins. Am I being as big a perfectionist with this as I did at the debut? No. Okay, cautiously, I think we have the cover on. So because this map is beautiful and gorgeous and I absolutely am not gonna hot glue it, what I did do is I hot glued some little pieces of foam on there, and then I just kind of loosely packing tape it on. There's a better long-term solution, but you know, it is what it is. We love a safety pin moment, don't we? Wow. Got our little maps. Onto the other side. Marie, the baguettes, hurry up. The noise that these make as I am wearing it are like really cute. So I have two completely fantastic pieces of news. One, I realized I should actually look at the like pictures I took about how I set this thing up, because I was realizing I did not remember how the top part went together. I took a picture of it, it's zip ties. The other great news, as I fling this at you, I love my past self so much. I labeled the fishing line wires with which dice it was. I could cry. I'm so happy. I'm not gonna have to cross-reference photos. Like, it's just, thank you, past self. I can even see which one went on which side. Like, it's a freaking miracle, y'all. I really just said zip tie rights with this cosplay, huh? It's always gonna be a trade-off with cosplay, right? I know that I'm the kind of person that's fine taking a little bit of time, like assembling something in the hotel room. Listen, we're just gonna make choices and they might not be the right ones, but like, it's gonna be okay. A fine little fistful of fairy lights, you know? And then we just gonna tape it on like so. Okay. We're on our way. Look at us, look at us. The thing I do to try and get these, you know, dispersed is really just to feed them in without like crunching them too badly. You just don't have a lot of control over where they lay. I definitely err on the side of having these string lights be looser, because I want the fishing line to be the thing that's really like supporting most of the weight. Of course, I like really started to hit a groove with what I was doing once my camera battery had died. So I'm going to jam the rest of these lights in a very powerful D4. I'm gonna pop our little flap on the knapsack, because that is the absolute last step to cover up all of these shenanigans. And then I'm gonna throw everything on. This is it. I think it's time to get everything on. I think I forgot to include this part in a lot of my breakdowns, but this is a little front strap here. It has tiny little notebooks and tiny little pencils because I just think they're cute. Also, this serves two functions, the first of which is very practical. It helps distribute the weight for the backpack. And secondly, it is nice to have something very detailed, very close to the kind of portrait range. I feel like that's a mistake I've made a lot in the past, is putting the details on my cosplays somewhere where they're never gonna be like captured by the cameras. Helpful to have something that looks nice and looks detailed if someone gets a closer framed portrait shot. Okay, so let's moment of truth it. It looks a little awkward, but the trick is to just squat and shift the weight properly. Getting my other arm in here. There we have it. This is actually usually the part that I need help with, because it's just helpful to have someone else hold the backpack straps together while I'm doing this, so give me a minute. And just like that, we're in the darn thing. It is so comfortable, it really is. You know, you can't really see the boots in this framing, but that's okay because they were kind of a thing I hot glued in the hotel room. Apologies if the audio takes a really sharp nosedive at this point. I forgot how much kind of ambient noise from things clacking around this cosplay produces. So what I think I'm gonna do is take us over there in the other room so that we can get some fuller body shots of this and get the full impact. It says a lot about me as a person that I'm like, yes, yes, but how can I make more? A thing I'm saying to myself as much as I am saying it to you is that wanting to make changes to a cosplay doesn't mean that the 1.0 version is bad or disappointing. I often need to remind myself that just because I tend to look at a project and see everything I didn't get to and everything I can change, that isn't what others see. And I can still be really proud of this really great build. The next time I wear this, I know I want to remake some of the clothes. Sketching in pencil and mostly using stash fabric means that the color scheme kind of got away from me a little, and I absolutely wish I had used a neutral tone in here anywhere, like a gray or a white or a tan would have balanced out this Crayola nonsense. I definitely have some additional items I want to get on the backpack to be more recognizable than I think parts of it are now. I also want to make the backpack cover travel better, like hot gluing things on is totally valid, but it kind of makes it a pain to store and put back on. Also, I'd love to build out some kind of like actual awning here to have the dice actually hang from. But my top thing that I really, really desperately want to make is a staff. Like, the look is supposed to have a staff, I just didn't have time and could not figure out what it would be when I already had so much going on. As fate would have it, I absolutely know what the staff would be now, and I sure couldn't have come up with it back then because I do want to make a staff of online D&D. I have no idea what it would look like, but don't tell me, I'll figure it out. I know this is where I should start to wrap it up, but first I have to say that I'm formally dedicating this video and also just all of this to my home D&D campaign because it's our 2nd birthday today, the day that I'm filming this right now. My Storm Herald Barbarian is a toddler. Yes, there's a lot of actual play content that means a lot to me, but I really think of this cosplay as an expression of love for the friends I play with because I don't know how I could have gotten through the ongoing global catastrophe without them. Tell your DM you appreciate them today. Go make something weird and overambitious. Thank you for watching this all the way through. It is absolutely the #1 most helpful thing for me right now. I really appreciate you spending this time, and I'll see you next week. As a special treat, I'm also going to show you how I handle doors, which is just crab walking through them. You just get in a very deep squat. You're fine. You're fine. Oh, it's leg day.